This presentation is about app performance. We will have an interactive session, a part of that, where I would like and invite you to take out your own applications and measure that while we're going through the session. And it will give you a very good understanding of areas to focus on to improve your app's performance. That will be if we have time for Q&A, it will be just before the Q&A. So you have some time to get your release APK ready, or your release app, onto your phone. If you have it on the Play Store, just download that. Don't use the debug version, use the one that you actually release. Comparing it to previous presentations on app performance, this one will be more actionable and more high level, because we talked a lot about the things underneath, the things that are, how do you do baseline profiles, how do you do startup profiles, how do all these things work? So this will be a bit more high level to help you make the right decision and why you should do things and how much impact those things can have. And it should also help you to get your product owners and the rest of your team onto the same page with you in order to actually work on performance. So if you're cool with doing that test in the end, I'm very excited for that, because that's a nice thing that I've been working on. I would like to essentially run a test with all of you on that. With that, well, hi, I'm Ben. I've been doing Android for a long time now. I started here in Berlin. It's always good to be back at droidcon Berlin, because it's such an amazing conference with so many amazing people that over the years have become friends. So if you have questions, if you want to talk about performance with me, or just community or anything, I'm here for that. So for today, we're not focusing about the community part though, right, in this presentation. I would like to first understand where you are in your app performance journey. Then I would give you a quick overview of the tooling landscape. And I want to share with you why you should care for app performance, probably more than you already do. I want to show you two main things when it comes to performance, the two sticks of measuring, so to speak. And I want to introduce you to a new approach to understand performance, which is the interactive test that we will do in the end. So I'm sure that many of you struggle with some things. So do you struggle with slow app starts? So that means your app is either perceived or measured that it's slow, so that users think that it's not as fast as it should be. Fast app starts are highly correlated with the user satisfaction, and user satisfaction is a key factor for having an app that users use and like and recommend to others. So slow app starts are a problem, and it's a struggle if you have that. Same for choppy animations. If you ever scroll through your app or click buttons and the animations don't run smoothly, that is a problem for your users, and your users are not going to like the app as much as they should, because you put all that love and effort and work in it. Or even worse, frozen frames. So that means that the users actually realize that the entire frames freeze and it doesn't really work the way that the animation shouldn't, that there's no animations, or you actually actively removed animations because you couldn't make them work the way you wanted them to work. Or even worse, if you have high ANR rates. So those are things that, well, probably most of you know already, but they happen when your main thread becomes so blocked and so stuffed that nothing works for a while, and either in the background or worse, in the foreground, the users see those, and usually you see those in the wild and they're really hard to debug and to inspect. And in the end, all of that leads to frustrated users. So if you struggle with any of these 5 points, this is your session, because I want you to walk out of here with very actionable ways to fix those problems in the big picture. There's smaller, more individual, more bespoke things that you can take for your app individually, but if you don't do these couple of things, there's nothing else you should be doing before them. So let's see where you are right now. Do you do no performance optimizations? Just give me a hand if you don't do anything to optimize your app's performance. Awesome, you will be able to know how to do things in the end. Would you like to do performance optimizations, but don't really get the time for one reason or another? That's the vast majority for now, so that's good to see that you're already working on it, because I will also help you to convince the other parts of your team that working on performance is really, really important. Or are you already working on performance? That's amazing, because I will give you a way to go deeper in that as well. Again, we're working on the big picture here. We're not going in depth in all these little minute things, but I will give you some things that show you a way to actually make things better on a whole. But we also have to learn what's going on. Like, those are the tools of the trade that we're talking about today. For app performance, there's a couple of things that we're looking at. So build time improvements, runtime improvements, and then measuring, and in the end profiling to go deeper into more specific areas where there might be issues. For build time improvements, the most important thing that you can do is upgrading to AGP8. I know AGP7 to AGP8 was a bit of a change with APIs and all that. If you're still stuck on AGP7, the upgrade to AGP8 is one of the most important things that you can do right now, because that brings in build speed improvements, it brings in new libraries underneath the hood that are bundled with the Android Gradle plugin. It brings in new ways that the Android Gradle plugin can make your app run faster as well and more stable. So take that leap, do that upgrade. If you struggle with it, please come talk to me after this presentation, because that's the thing. Well, actually, I have office hours today and tomorrow, so literally just come up there, talk with me. It's in the back of the hall there, because I want to understand what your problems are, want to see whether there's ways that we already are aware of fixing them, if there's ways that we need to improve the documentation or make things better for you to fix those things, because we don't want you to suffer from, well, in that case, old AGP versions and slower build times or less performance. The second thing is that I want you to enable is R8. So minify your app with R8. So what you get from that at build time is you get a smaller app. It does tree shaking, so it means that everything that you don't use in your application, all the code that is not called, gets removed if you have everything configured in the right way. I know program files can be a bit of a pain. I'll address that in a second as well. But getting that right has a huge impact on your app, how that gets run and how it gets installed on users' devices. So that's the two things that you should do at build time to improve your application. There's more, but those are the two biggest things that you can do right now if you haven't done them. For runtime improvements, if you have AGP8 and R8 enabled already, then you can do more things. So what I'm talking about are the foundation. You have to do the upgrade to AGP8. If you have R8 enabled, you can use startup profiles. And startup profiles is a really cool way that the DEX files get reshuffled, so only the code that is used in the app startup will be present in that DEX file, so that makes it faster and more cost efficient to load that first DEX file, makes it faster to start the app. The second thing where you don't need R8, but still recommended, is baseline profiles. If you have paid attention over the past couple of years, you might already heard one thing or another on baseline profiles. The most common misconception that we hear about baseline profiles is it only makes app startup faster. That's not true. Baseline profiles basically takes everything that has to be just-in-time compiled, so all code that is run on the Android runtime, and pre-compiles that. So it gets faster for your users to run that code from the get-go. So that means if you ever have scrolled your app and it felt the first time you scroll down and back up, it felt choppy or janky, that was not just your imagination, that really happened, because that is just-in-time compilation as it works. So it gets interpreted, just-in-time compiled, ready for ahead-of-time compilation, and then the first time you scroll it's weird, and the second time it's fine. So that is actually what happens in just-in-time compilation. And you can see that in a tool that I'll introduce later on as well. You can see it very clearly when that happens. The second thing that you use, so the third thing is, again, R8, because it speeds up any code at runtime. Because even if you write really, really machine-readable code, your coworkers probably won't like that. At least I wouldn't like it, because I like code that's easy to read and understand for me, and I'm a human. What you want to do is write code that's easy to understand, easy to maintain, and let a tool that actually speaks Android runtime fluently, in that case R8, do the job of translating everything to be as optimized as possible for that runtime. Use R8, because it has huge impact on the performance that you will see at runtime for anything that's unbundled. So all the code that you write, all the libraries that you bring in, all the Android X libraries, even Compose. So if you held off using Compose because you think, oh, there's a thing with performance and it might not be the thing where you're looking at. You have probably used it in a debuggable build or you haven't enabled R8 properly. If you use R8 in compatibility mode, so that means R8 is compatible with ProGuard, that doesn't optimize everything as it should. So enable R8, enable full mode, and from there on you can use, you can see how much more performant your app will be. And I guarantee you, it is a big thing. So for baseline profiles, just back to that, why this is super important is you can use it for your app or for your library. So if you're a library developer, you can generate a baseline profile, and that will be consumed by the library consumers as well. So all your major API calls, they can be put in a baseline profile, and your users of your library will profit from that as well. It optimizes the code from the install time. So that means as soon as the user opens the app for the first time, your app will run as smooth as you want it to be. One thing that I've heard today and over the past couple of days as well, questions on, but how do I deal with login? There's multiple ways to deal with login with a baseline profile because you test that, and app startup is not always login. You can pass an intent into the generation and can use that intent to then use the login data afterwards, basically have the logged in flow. You can run entire user flows, and you should run entire user flows. So essentially where your users are, you want to optimize that. It's similar to building a road. It's fine to have like a small path and a very small path. That's fine if you don't use it very often. But if you use that path a lot, then it usually gets paved over or it gets wider, and there's more people being able to use that road. Same, to think of it, baseline profiles are that. It's paving the road for your users. It makes it smoother and easier to use your application by removing that just-in-time compilation step. Over time, they will be augmented by Google Play's cloud profiles. The cloud profiles are essentially user-aggregated information that enables just-in-time compilation similar to baseline profiles, but on a more wide level. So it basically takes that time, takes all the information that gets aggregated from the users and puts it into a more widely available, like a wider profile. Shipping a baseline profile doesn't, cloud profiles don't replace baseline profiles, they augment them. Because you tell the Android operating system what is the things that you've seen, and the users then just say, okay, but there's this and there's this. Think of it like a footpath across an area that you haven't thought of. And it's fine to not maintain that footpath in the baseline profile. You don't have to put everything in there, just the stuff that's mostly used. A bit more in detail on the DEX layout optimizations. What happens when the app gets DEXed, so when the app gets packaged into different DEX files in your Android, in the APK, what happens is the code just gets shuffled in there at some point. Doesn't really, it's arbitrary, it's not random, it's arbitrary. And startup code can be distributed over multiple different DEX files. There's a lot of reasons why that happens, and the main issue that I see with that is that the first DEX file gets loaded, so classes DEX get loaded, that gets instantiated, it gets inflated, and that takes memory, it takes time to load that whole thing from disk, it takes CPU cycles to inflate all that, to have everything there. And if not all the code that is required for app startup, the next DEX file will be loaded. And if not everything is there, the next file will be loaded. And everything that's in each and every single one of those files will have to be loaded. So if you take all the stuff that is required for app startup and put it in the first classes DEX file, what happens is your app startup will be faster, it will be less memory consumption, it will be less CPU cycles needed. So what we've seen is with startup profiles, it speeds up app startup by roughly 30%. So if you have struggles with app startup, startup profiles is the thing that you should 100% opt for. And we've seen when you use it with a baseline profile, that first app startup is between 50 and 60% of startup time improvement. There's obviously a point where it's say like percentage and that really doesn't make any more difference. So if you have an app startup of like half a second or so, you don't have to worry for that. But if you struggle with app startup, if you see that it's slow, if you feel that it's slow, then startup profiles is the main thing that you should be looking into. Now let's talk about how do you measure those things? Like how do you understand, now after you know this is what you should be doing, those are the three things, so baseline profiles, R8, and startup profiles, how do you measure what's going on in the application? We have two ways, and the first one is benchmarking. Benchmarking is not a new concept, but essentially you measure the app's performance on a real device. It gives you extremely detailed metrics of what's going on. And it gives you comparable results because you have a device that you can reset, that you can basically do the same thing over and over again. So those results are comparable over time. So you can see if one release introduces performance regressions. And you can do that fully automated as well. You have to plug in the device somewhere, but it's a way that you can just do that. To get started, it's very straightforward with Android Studio. Just click New Module, and there is a dialog where it's benchmark, and you have two ways of benchmarking. One is macro benchmark, and the other one is micro benchmark. It will generate the module once you click finish and pull in the dependencies and create run configuration. So you don't have to do any of that. Android Studio does it. Like all the stable versions, like the latest stable version and above, like all of those have all this built in. The one that I want you to focus on first is the macro benchmark library. Handful of reasons why I want you to focus on that is, firstly, well, it is used for baseline profile generation. You can generate baseline profiles by hand if you want to. I would recommend heavily against that because you will fall into a lot of different problems with that. So use the macro benchmark library, and what that does is use UI Automator to generate a user journey. Basically, UI Automator is kind of like, well, you click through those different parts, you select something, you click it, and it just takes all that and captures the methods and classes that have been called and puts them into a file called the baseline profile. It's also used for startup profile generation. Startup profile generation just is a flag, so it's very straightforward as well to set that for that specific user journey. And you can also use the macro benchmark library to measure those user journeys. How fast are they? You can use it with a lot of different metrics. You can use startup metrics, so that gives you milliseconds, how fast something started. You can use frame timing metrics, so that will show you how many frames were slow, how many frames were slow by what percent, like how slow were they. You can also have very custom metrics on specific trace points. So if you care for the transitions from one screen to another, you can measure that. You can use custom metrics to measure every single thing that is happening on the Android device with that benchmarking library. And you can measure it to an extremely detailed amount and can measure it fully automatable and reproducible. So you can see if you use a slow device, that it's slower. You can see where there's big issues that might be exaggerated. So that's why I recommend use a slow device rather than a very fast device for those, because if there's problems, they will show up on the slow devices first. But there's a lot of documentation, guidance, and all that for the macro benchmark library out there. So on developer.android.com, macro benchmark, you will find all that, or anything that you look for. Guidance is there for this. If you miss anything, reach out to me. On the other hand, we have the micro benchmark library. The micro benchmark library is really good for people that care for in-depth performance as inner loop things, like hot loop stuff, when you have code that gets called over and over again. If you have composables that get called a lot, for example, you can measure that. If you have parsing code that gets called a lot, you can do that. In many cases, you don't really have to touch it. I wanted to call it out for completeness sake because it is a different library and is not as commonly used as the macro benchmark library. But if you focus on minute details and minute things with performance, that is the way that I want you to look at. Again, loads of guidance available. So now you know how to improve performance with these tools. Now you know how to measure what happened. And the next thing is profiling. So profiling is a way to collect and inspect system traces for Android. So basically, you have the possibility to collect a trace, and afterwards you can visualize it with different tools. And you can understand what is happening, how long, which call takes specifically, on which CPU it works. You can go in extreme details with this. In many cases, you don't have to. You look at big blocks of code that gets run that you might be able to break up into different codes. And you can look at it in two ways. So one of them is Android Studio, where you have a new redesigned task-centric design that can show you exactly what you want to do, what are the things that you're looking at. I'll show exactly how that works in a second. And you have the possibility to inspect CPU, memory, power, or rendering, and a lot of different things as well. And we're working on improving that part with even more actionable ways to profile your app performance. You have that on an app level, so it won't give you everything, which is nice because it's more focused. And it gives you that on an app level inspection. So it gives you everything that's happening in your package, and you can see exactly how all the things that are happening on that at runtime affect your app and how your code affects the device, and whether there's things that are slow, whether there's things that are fast. And you can collect a trace or load it with Android Studio. So this is a screen for things that you can capture there, so you can different activities, so like what's happening on the system as well. You can say you want to analyze memory usage over time. You want to see CPU hotspots either with samples or like call set sampling or full method tracing. You can do the same thing for memory consumption and look at metrics like network usage and all that as well while the app is running. The second one, my favorite, is Perfetto. It's my favorite because over time I realized that the amount of information that it gives is way more than the profilers. But if you want to get started, don't get started with Perfetto because it can be overwhelming. Just going ahead for one slide, that's just a very small thing that's going on in Perfetto. Those are frames that are happening, orange or slow, and those are different things that are happening in a specific thing on the UI thread there. So if you don't know what's going on, you don't really want to use that as your starting point. But the cool thing is you don't have to install it. You don't have to install Android Studio. You can use it on the web completely, so that's nice. And you can inspect everything that's happening on the system. So if you have a lot of services, binder calls, or want to see whether it's actually your app or some other app that is causing issues, you can see all these things with Perfetto. So it's really nice to visualize traces in there. You can query everything. So there's a SQL language as well. So you can basically have the SQL way to just look at everything that is happening with that specific trace. Also, those traces that you can use in Android Studio or Perfetto fall out of any tracing that you do with benchmarking libraries, so you can afterwards see, oh, this was a slow trace, what happened there? Why was this slower than the other one? So you can look at the outliers. So next to all the tools, like why should you actually care for performance? If you have improved app performance, that makes your users happier. And happy users are likely to use apps for longer and are more likely to keep them on their devices. And that's what you want. You want your users to use your app, you want them to like them, you want them to keep it on their device and not uninstall it just after they've used it. And they're also more likely to give you positive comments, shared with other people, and rated highly on the Play Store, which is also things that we found you probably might want to like, and you want to look at it. The second thing is it gives you better business results. So we've seen time and time again that apps that are doing well in the Play Store, they also score high on performance comparisons. So high performance, technical performance correlates very heavily with better business performance. And it means that users are also more likely to spend money in your app if they can do that. And that's another thing that makes your business stakeholders happier. So that's why it's likely a good thing to focus on performance. So how do you get there? How do you get from where you are right now to having an app that really performs well? So we implemented quick wins. The quick wins are baseline profiles is the biggest quick win. I've done a workshop last week at IO Connect 2 times, and there were about 40 participants, and about half of those brought their own application. And they were able to implement baseline profiles in a, I think, like 30-minute workshop. So it's worth investing in that, because if you can, in 30 minutes, improve your app runtime and startup time by roughly 30%, I don't know, I haven't found any better way to invest my time to improve performance. So that's the first one. And then you show that to your product owner and say, like, hey, this is what we've seen. Let's measure that over a given period of time, see how much better our business metrics will be. And then you implement more. So then you say, like, okay, all right, we haven't done that for a while. Let's take a look at that. Then startup profiles is essentially, it's the next step after that, and that's very straightforward. So once you have baseline profiles, startup profiles, you're good to go with it. And then you can go deeper in hotspots, take profiling into account and all that. So, like I said, using R8 gives you the possibility to speed up runtime by roughly up to 30%. Not every code, not every network call will be part of that. Not the IO-bound traffic will be a part of that. But it does a lot of good things for you. So it removes unused code. It is the foundation for startup profiles. Soon, we will have an annotation-based API for defining those calls as well. So you don't have to do ProGuard files that are very decoupled from the code that you write, but you're able to do exclusions, say, not just at keep, but things like this code is being used by reflection, this code uses reflection, keep the API surface of this call, this package is important to me. You can do that via annotations. The API is out there already. It's not stable yet, so that's why I don't want to show any code, because that will change. but that is a very good thing to take a look at as soon as we have that, because it brings that a lot closer to your code. It also makes building faster because the exclusions don't have to be as wide as they currently are, most likely in your apps. Second is upgrade to AGP8. Gets you better build speed, new D8 and R8 versions. So D8 is the Dexter, R8 is our resource shrinker and optimization. It gives you higher API stability because we committed to API stability from that. And there's a lot of other under the hood improvements with AGP8. And we have startup profiles that gives you 15 to 30% of startup improvement on top of baseline profiles. Faster instantiation time, totally worth it. And baseline profiles. And because I've heard that repetition works, I have a slide in a different way if you don't like to read all the small things. So you use R8, you use startup profiles, you have baseline profiles, you use benchmarking, and AGP8. Those are the things that I want you to use. And this is what you get. You get faster app startup, you get fewer ANRs because faster runtime code that executes faster, ANRs a lot less. You get smoother animations, you get smaller app size, and you get better ratings. So this is one of the slides that I want you to show to your product owners. And because repetition works, I've got another one. So those are the things that you can see based on these 3 things that you are able to implement usually within a sprint or 2, depending on the other workload. But I know that it's been deprioritized in a lot of ways. One thing that we've heard a lot is that developers have looked at the information locally. So, and then looked at it in production, and things are different there. So when you look at the data locally with the benchmark, that gives you the ability to understand the impact of all the performance improvements in a lab environment. It's low noise, it's reproducible, and you have access to all the trace files. You can take a look at the startup and frame timing to see exactly what's going on in those numbers, because those are key metrics and should be key metrics for your app as well. You run that on low-end devices to accelerate any performance issues. On the other hand, we have production monitoring. So production monitoring gives you metrics that you can't reproduce locally, and it uses a different stick to measure, because those are more noisy. They are in a field environment where you have different users, different data. It gets aggregated information as well that can be filtered on the device level, so you can look at it for the device that you care for. And those numbers will be different, like the startup timing and frame timing numbers will be a bit different than what you see locally. It's not a problem as long as those numbers are consistently improving or consistently the same above those different metrics, but they will be different, so it's not a problem. It's a well-known thing. For the sake of time, I would like to skip the last 2 slides, but I would like you to know where to start with performance for your app, and I would like to give you a way that you can easily reproduce that. So I've worked on performance for a while, and I've talked a lot about how you can do all those things, how they're important. But we came up with a thing called the App Performance Score. The App Performance Score, as a working title, by the way, it's curated metrics that provide you the maximum impact for all the tools and best practices. There's a scoring for each different topic that will show you what you should be focusing on and what you can neglect. So if you already have fast app startup, you don't have to focus on that. If you already have good rendering, you don't really have to focus on that. And there's a static part, which essentially does static analysis, and there's a dynamic evaluation as well. So that is at runtime, and that changes depending on the device that you run your app on. And that score can be used also to track progress over time. And it comes with actionable guidance. So each of those points comes with guidance, what you should be doing, what you should be focusing on. For app startup, if it's fast, that's fine. Users don't want to wait, and it has to be, it's like I said, it's highly correlated to retention and revenue. And rendering performance should be smooth. Fast and full screen rendering should also be, full screen renders should also be fast. Animation should also overall be fluid. And if you have those things in place, that's what the premise for the app score is. And the second is that it's also not just for software engineers, because I've been talking to a lot of software engineers and a lot of different teams, and they want to know metrics very detailed. So you want to see how that works in macro benchmark. You want to see the milliseconds. You want to see the exact frames that are happening. You want to see exactly what's going on. And that's fine. And it's the more correct way. But it's not the way, it doesn't mean, just because it's more correct doesn't mean that it's better or anything, it's just more correct. If you don't speak the language of the rest of your team, you can be correct as you want, but you still won't be heard. So we also want to focus on the product owners with that. So I want to democratize performance, understanding of performance measures and actions that you can take. So you can do the dynamic score without actually do any testing. And the static score for that, you have to do some tooling and use those. And you can do those tests very quickly in a realistic way. And for the sake of time, let's take the test. So if you have your phone, I would like you to do a couple of things for your app that you want to test. Firstly, this is kind of where it becomes interactive. So yeah, you can take out your phone, you can look at your phone. I won't blame you, it's fine. Take out your phone, kill your app, and then tap on the home screen, from the home screen, open the app, and count the seconds that it takes. And then there's more than that. There's the scrolling, and there's full screen rendering. So you've got your device, you killed it, you killed the phone, sorry, not the phone, the app, and then you just have to keep score. So let's get going. For app startup, open the app from the home screen and count the seconds until the app is usable. If you're 5 seconds or longer, you get 0 points. If you're clearly less than 1 second, you get 5 points. And in between there. Right. Anybody more time? You can reproduce that. You can do that 2, 3 times as well to see like how fast it is, but you have to kill it in between, otherwise it will be a warm start or a hot start. Okay, the second is a bit more challenging. I hope everybody got their score. Remember that number. For a second is you scroll through your app or you click through different parts of your screens. And if you want to, you can just go to settings first. And in your settings, you find the hardware UI rendering overlay. You want to enable that, and there is a bar, and every time that bar turns red, that's a problem. And also you can see how noticeable are those animations, like how noticeable are issues with that animation. I see a couple of people scrolling, so that's awesome. It's not just people waiting for me to continue talking, because I'm waiting for you to scroll and kind of give yourself a score on how well does it animate. Does it feel like I've been heard afterwards, or does it feel really nice? Does it feel like a good scrolling way? Does it feel like it doesn't get in the way? Does it feel like you don't wait, or are there no animations possible? So if there's no animations possible with your interactions, you get 0 points. If it's absolutely smooth, you get 5. I wouldn't expect anybody to get 5 points, by the way. That's very unlikely for most of those things. If it does, I would like to hear from you how you did it. And the third one is you open a new activity. So that's a full screen renderer. So you click from your home screen onto somewhere else and see the full screen render. And then you know your app best, but if it feels like you're waiting for something more than you should, if it feels like there's things that are just a bit off about the animation, a bit off about the time that you have to wait there, you have to score yourself with that. All right, does anybody want some more time for the scoring, or should I reveal how that score affects kind of that evaluation? All right, so there's 3 buckets that we currently have. This is, by the way, just for this presentation. If you fall in the low bucket, it's fine. You can fix that. I told you how to fix it today. I told you a couple of ways that you can actually get going. If you don't think that the things that I talked about, so baseline profiles, R8, and starter profiles, will fix your problems, then come and talk to me. I'm more than happy to help you out. I want to hear the problems. I want to help you fix the issues that you have with your app on app startup, on runtime performance. You can follow all the best practices that we have out there. So on developer.com performance, take a look at that. If you fall in the mediocre bucket, that means, well, you can still do better. And it's a good thing as well. And you can use the available metrics to see areas of improvement. You can take a look at what we just did, these 3 areas, and see what you want to focus on. And focus your baseline profile on the area that you don't have in there yet. If there's other things, then focus on those areas. If your app is outstanding, I would like to hear that as well. Because I think that that's also awesome. And you should give yourself a pat on the back. That's amazing. I'm very happy to see apps performing well. That is what I want to see. That's what your users want to see. And that's what you all and your product owners also should want to see. This is also just a very lightweight way of scoring it. It is designed to, this part of it is designed to be able to help the product owners to understand which areas they should improve on and how they should improve on that. And it is missing all the guidance that we have. It is missing all the links to all the guidance. In the end, this all will be combined into one way to score that from a technical level as well as from a non-technical level. So a product owner, designer, CTO, CEO that's not deeply in the code will understand what they should focus on and how they should improve it. It's not that they use a different phone or a very high-end phone. You can use the worst phone that you have, pass it to them, and say, this is what you should be doing. So keep an eye out for the full app performance score that will come at some point. In the meantime, there's a couple of steps that I want you to take right now, which are, like I told you a couple of times throughout this presentation, but I've heard repetition works, so I'm repeating it one more time. You want to integrate the Android Creator plugin 8+. So currently, I think we're at 8.4 stable. You want to integrate baseline profiles. I want you to use R8 as much as you can. If you have issues with that, see me. And I want you to integrate starter profiles. And for the full picture of guidance, take a look at developerandroid.com/performance. That's where all the guidance is up to date. That's where we will also find the app performance score once it's out there as well. And I have office hours. And I think we've got like 4 minutes left. So if you're interested to ask questions in front of the audience, now's your time. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.